All right, buckle up, everybody. We're going way back in time. We're talking Genesis 10, the Table of Nations.
Yeah, it's like a family tree, but on an epic scale. Tracing everyone back to Noah and his sons right after the flood.
It's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. Like, their kids are supposed to have populated the whole world.
Yeah, talk about pressure.
But this text, it doesn't just like list names. It connects them to places, gives us hints about ancient migration. It's kind of amazing how much information is packed into this one chapter.
It really gives us a glimpse into how people thousands of years ago saw the world, like their geography, their understanding of different people groups. It's pretty fascinating.
So we've got Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Let's start with Japheth. His line seems to point towards Europe and parts of Asia. What's going on with his descendants?
Well, one thing that stands out is the connection to the sea. You've got Javan, one of Japheth's sons, and his sons are linked to like maritime peoples, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim, Dodanim.
So we could be talking about like the ancestors of some of the earliest seafaring cultures, the ones who really opened up trade and exploration in the ancient world.
Yeah, exactly. The names really suggest seafaring, trade, connections all around the Mediterranean.
Wow, that's pretty incredible to think about. But let's shift gears for a minute and talk about Ham. His line is, I don't know, a little more dramatic maybe?
You could say that, yeah. This is where we run into some of the most well-known figures from the Bible, and yeah, sometimes a little controversial.
Like Cush, one of Ham's sons. He's the father of Nimrod.
Ah, yes. Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord.
Almost like mythical, right?
Yeah, he's a fascinating character, like this powerful hunter, but also a builder of great cities. It's interesting how the text links like one individual to the rise of civilization in Mesopotamia.
And not just any cities, right? We're talking Babylon and Nineveh. Those names, even today, they conjure up images of like powerful empires.
Right, incredible architecture. And it's really striking that Nimrod is credited with founding them.
Now, we can't talk about Ham's line without mentioning the Philistines.
Oh, of course, the Philistines. Turns out they descended from the Casluhites, another group within Ham's lineage.
The Casluhites. Not exactly a household name, but...
No, not really. But their descendants, the Philistines, they definitely are. And knowing this connection, it adds another layer to their story, especially their relationship with the Israelites, right?
Yeah, suddenly their backstory gets a lot more interesting. And speaking of interesting, we've got to talk about Canaan, another son of Ham. His lineage is like a who's who of groups in biblical history. Hittites, Jebusites, Amorites, it's
a lot.
It really is.
And it's here that the Table of Nations really starts to like overlap with other biblical stories, because the Canaanite clans, they're described as being scattered, which actually sets the stage for future conflicts with the Israelites when they come into the Promised Land.
So this text, it's not just a family tree, it's actually laying the groundwork for some major power struggles later in the Bible.
Yeah, it's like we're seeing this ancestral map of these conflicts. It's fascinating.
It's pretty amazing, right? Okay, so we've got Japheth and Ham, both with some pretty incredible descendants. Now let's turn to Shem. He seems to hold a special place in this family tree.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Shem is the ancestor of Eber.
And Eber is...
the namesake of the Hebrew people. So through his line, you can trace all the way back to Abraham and the patriarchs.
So we're talking about like the roots of the Israelite people.
Right.
Okay, the text mentions Arphaxad and Shelag, key figures leading to Eber. But it's Eber's sons that I'm really curious about.
Oh, okay. What about them?
Well, first you've got Peleg. And his name is super interesting, right? Because it means division.
Ah, yes.
And the text specifically says that the earth was divided during his time. So I immediately think, okay, Tower of Babel. Is this like a subtle reference to that event?
It's certainly possible, right? I mean, the name could be reflecting a tradition about a major event that led to the, scattering of peoples and languages.
It definitely makes you wonder. Then there's Joktan, Peleg's brother. He has all these sons?
Yeah, Joktan's sons are interesting. Their names really do suggest connections to all these different tribes and locations. It really reinforces this idea of, humanity spreading out, becoming more diverse after the flood. Each name is like a little clue pointing to a different corner of the ancient world.
It really is amazing how much information is packed into this text. It's like people, places, possible historical events. It's all woven together.
It really is. It's like a tapestry with all these different threads connecting different parts of the ancient world. And, we're really just starting to unravel it.
Yeah, it really is amazing how this one chapter just pulls you in. And one thing that keeps jumping out at me is how much importance the Table of Nations puts on names.
Yeah, that's a great observation. In the ancient world, names, they weren't just like labels. They carried deep meaning, reflecting a person's character, their family line, their place of origin, sometimes even a major event that happened when they were born.
So these names, they're like little stories themselves.
Exactly, like little linguistic fossils, preserving these traces of ancient history and culture.
So like Peleg, again, right. His name meaning division,
Yeah.
and the text saying the earth was divided during his life. Maybe it's the Tower of Babel, maybe something else.
Right. It definitely makes you think. What do you think?
I don't know. It's so interesting, though. It's like it opens up more questions than answers.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious about something you mentioned before, like how this Table of Nations gives us a window into how people back then understood ethnicity and geography.
Oh yeah, definitely. This is long before, detailed maps or even the idea of like nation states as we know them today. So it really is a glimpse into how they saw the world. They were trying to make sense of all these different human cultures and like trace them back to a common ancestor.
It's like a global family tree almost.
Yeah. It highlights how important lineage and ancestry were to them. They saw themselves as connected to their ancestors, and those connections really defined who they were and where they belonged.
That's so interesting. Okay, so we've gone through these different lineages, we've talked about the names, and we're starting to understand like the worldview this text is coming from. But why does any of this matter? You know what I mean? Why should we care about this ancient family tree?
It's a good question. I think for me, the Table of Nations, it gives us this amazing window into how people in the past thought about the world, their questions about identity, belonging, where differences come from.
And it's a good reminder that our own perspectives are shaped by, our time and culture, just like theirs were.
Exactly. And by trying to understand those different perspectives, it can help us challenge our own assumptions. It can help us develop a deeper understanding of the world around us.
It also makes you think about how history is told, right? Like whose perspective is being presented.
Absolutely. And on top of all that, there's just something so human about tracing our roots. Exploring where we came from, making those connections to people and places from long ago.
It's like we're all part of this big story that stretches back thousands of years.
Exactly. It connects us to all those who came before us. And the Table of Nations, even though it's so ancient, it speaks to that desire to understand our place in that larger story, where we come from, how we fit into it all.
Okay, so we've traveled back in time, looked at these ancient lineages, we've met some familiar characters, some less familiar ones. What else can we learn from this text?
Well, we've really just scratched the surface here. There's always more to discover, more to connect, more layers to unpack.
I mean, it really makes you wonder if that's part of the point of this text.
Yeah.
To make us keep exploring and making connections.
It's a good point, and it brings up a really important question. What was the purpose of the Table of Nations? Was it just meant to be like a historical record, a genealogy, or was there something more to it?
Because on the surface, it seems pretty straightforward, just listing who came from who. But then you see all these layers of meaning in the names, the geography, the connections to other stories. It's clearly not simple.
Yeah, and that complexity makes you think that maybe it's doing more than just recording history. It could be trying to present a certain way of understanding the world, how humanity, God, the world, how they're all connected through these family ties.
So it's not just about, who begat who. It's about how the authors understood their own place in the world and how they saw different nations developing and interacting with each other.
Exactly. And that perspective, even though it's coming from such a different time and culture, it can still challenge us to think about our own place in the world, our connections to the past, how we relate to other cultures today.
That's something to think about for sure. We've covered so much today, and it feels like we're just getting started with the Table of Nations.
Oh, absolutely. It's a text that just keeps giving. Every layer you peel back, new questions come up, new insights emerge. I want to leave our listener with a question, something to think about. Does the Table of Nations, does it mainly aim to explain history or to present a particular worldview?
Yeah, it really makes you think about how we understand history and what we choose to focus on.
Definitely. And it reminds us that no history is ever neutral, right? It's always coming from someone's point of view.
We've seen that with the Table of Nations, how it brings together genealogy, geography, even those hints of historical events.
Mm-hmm.
And it all fits into this idea of humanity spreading out after the flood.
So as we finish up this deep dive, I'd encourage everyone listening to think about how this text can help us understand ancient perspective.
Yeah.
How important was ancestry to them? How did they view their connection to a common ancestor?
Yeah, and how did that shape their understanding of the world around them?
Exactly.
It's been such a fascinating journey, going back in time, exploring these family lines, meeting all these characters, and really wrestling with these big questions the Table of Nations brings up. About history, about identity, about what it means to be human.
And who knows, maybe as you dig deeper into the Table of Nations yourself, you'll uncover even more connections, even more insights that we didn't even touch on today.
It's definitely a text that rewards curiosity. It makes you want to keep exploring.
Absolutely.
Until next time, happy exploring.